They came from the black beyond, riding on thrones of plasma and gold, called themselves the sovereigns. The galaxy bowed, one by one kneeling before false gods who spoke in thunder, and took what they wanted, planets, surrendered their skies, moons were mined until hollow, species were branded and sorted, worship or extinction. That was the deal. Earth was last. But Earth had already died once. They didn't know that. We called it the collapse. 70% of the surface lost to fire and famine, oceans poisoned, governments eaten alive from the inside. The ones who crawled out of the ashes weren't diplomats, they weren't idealists. They were survivors, hardened, paranoid, and very, very prepared. I was there when the sovereigns made their first broadcast, towering figures in golden armor speaking 20 languages at once, their faces hidden behind shifting masks, submit and be uplifted, defy and be forgotten. Earth's answer came 6 hours later, not words, coordinates, a single warship rose from Mars orbit, the Vanguard. No political council, no UN vote, just a ship old and angry, powered by tech we never shared, crewed by ghosts who'd been waiting for this. I was one of those ghosts. My name doesn't matter. I was born in the domes under Europa's ice, raised in silence, trained in hatred. I don't remember my mother's face, but I remember the sovereign's arrival. The way every channel lit up with their demand to kneel. The way Earth went dark for a full minute after. No one said it aloud, but we all knew. That silence, that was us deciding. The Vanguard wasn't sleek, it wasn't pretty. It was a floating fortress scarred by years of deep space tests, cannons mounted like fangs, its hull stitched with classified alloys from black site, labs buried under Antarctica's ruins, its AI locked behind 6 fail-safes, its crew, the forgotten ones, recruits who didn't exist, war criminals repurposed for vengeance, engineers who had no families to go home to. We launched under the cover of silence. The sovereigns didn't see us as a threat. We were ants, they said, dirt under their boots. But what they didn't understand, what they never saw coming, was that ants don't fight fair. Ants build empires underground, and when they rise, they devour gods whole. We entered the sovereign system 2 weeks after launch. It wasn't just one planet. They had a whole star cluster wrapped in their grip. Ritual ships circled every world, extracting tribute, broadcasting control. Their capital hung in orbit like a cathedral made of starlight. That was our target. We didn't request permission, didn't issue warnings. The Vanguard locked onto the capital and opened fire. The first volley didn't just damage their ship, it tore a hole in their reality field, a tech they claimed was divine. But there was blood in their smoke, wires in their wreckage, screams, not holy hymns. That's when they learned we weren't their subjects. We were their reckoning. But it wasn't clean. It never is. After that first strike, they came at us with everything. Swarms of drone fighters, star-forged titans with minds built from enslaved consciousness, gods of their own design. They called it a purge. We called it round 1. The ship trembled, hull breach alarms. Fire in deck 6. I lost a crewmate when a plasma bolt vaporized the hallway we were running through. Her name was Mara. She used to hum old Earth songs when we were off shift, never missed a shot. Gone in a flash of blue, we kept moving. Down in the AI core, the fail-safes were melting. We had no choice. We let the machine think freely, and it didn't. Pray, it calculated cold and clear. Within minutes, the vanguard adapted. Cannons re-angled. Shields repulsed at the molecular level. We cut through their divine fleet like a blade through silk. The sovereigns tried to speak again. This time not as gods, but as kings. Offering terms. You have proven your worth. Cease fire. Join us. Our captain, an old man with no rank, left just scars, spat blood, and gave a single order: burn them. So we did. But it wasn't over. Because something was waiting beneath their capital. Something older than them. Something that whispered in frequencies we weren't supposed to hear. And that's when I realized they weren't gods, but they were guarding something that might be. The vanguard didn't retreat. We couldn't, not because we were brave. Bravery's for people with something left to lose. We stayed because we knew something deeper was buried beneath their empire. Something they didn't want us to find. And because if we left, they'd come back smarter, angrier, more prepared. So we pressed forward. The capital ship of the sovereigns, called Seraphim Prime in their records, was still burning in low orbit when we made contact. Our scans peeled back its outer hull like layers of skin. Gold plating, crystalline core systems, organic wiring laced with biocircuitry. Beneath the facade it was tech, not magic, not divine. Just another system of control, but readings didn't stop at just heat, signatures, or energy surges. There were whispers in the data, not voices, frequencies, rhythmic pulses, buried deep in their architecture. Repeating signals looped and layered. Harmonics. It wasn't some alien language. It wasn't even meant to be read. It was meant to be felt through vibration, through instinct, through the animal part of your brain that recognizes something isn't right long before your logic catches up. The AI picked it up first. It didn't panic. It doesn't do panic. But it began running recursive error checks on itself, hundreds per second. It was glitching, the most advanced combat intelligence Earth ever created. And it was flinching like a dog sensing a coming storm. We should have left. Any sane crew would have warped out and nuked the whole system from light years away. But we weren't sane. We were angry, and we were close. The sovereign empire wasn't just ruled from Seraphim Prime. That ship was a monument, a beacon. But the real command structure, the root of their empire, wasn't in orbit. It was beneath the planet's surface. We found it when we traced the vibration signals. One by one they led us downward through defense satellites, through ruined cities turned into temples, through data vaults locked by DNA from extinct species, until we saw it. A hollow world. Not a planet, not really, more like a shell, a crust of metal and rock around a pulsing core that didn't obey any natural laws we recognized. Their true sanctuary, hidden from the galaxy, shielded by manipulation fields that scrambled. Long-range sensors. That was the real throne. And we were going to breach it. The captain didn't give a speech. That wasn't his style. He just gave us the coordinates, the attack vector, and one warning. Whatever's down there, it built them. We launched. Atmospheric entry was hell. Defense towers reactivated mid-descent. And our assault shuttles took immediate hits. One burst into flame before it even hit the lower cloud layer. Another. Detonated on the ice crust, a perfect red flower blooming through the storm. I watched through the viewport as one of our gunners, the kid we called Ratchet, burned alive in his chair. Didn't even scream. The fire took his oxygen first. We hit the surface like a meteor. The shockwave shattered kilometers of ice. Black spires erupted around us, reacting to our presence like a nervous system. Spines rising, nanite clouds forming, targeting us with antimatter bursts we barely dodged. But we pushed forward, crawling across alien soil under a sky that looked like it had been painted by something blind and angry. Then we reached the gate. It wasn't a door, it was an eye. Circular structure 200 m wide, carved from obsidian alloys that weren't supposed to exist. It opened when we got close. Not like a machine, not with pistons and gears. It opened like something breathing, like it was glad to see us. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about the sovereigns. They weren't the threat, they were the containment. Inside it was quiet, too quiet, no lights, no movement, just dark corridors that twisted without geometry, like the ship itself was being bent through space wrong. Walls made of memory alloys, shifting subtly with every step, recording us, learning us. We split into fire teams. I led Omega-3, just 4 of us now. Since Ratchet was gone, there was Blaine, the heavy gunner. Big guy, tattoos all over his neck, always muttering to himself. He'd been fighting since he was 14, some urban war back in the crater cities of the old Earth slums. He didn't trust anyone, not even me. Kel, our engineer, ex-Blacksite designer, used to work on weapons we weren't supposed to know existed. Kind that altered thought patterns or hijacked your dreams. She was too quiet, always watching. Probably the smartest one among us. Probably the most broken, too. And Hawk, our sniper, cold, fast. Unreadable. He didn't blink when people died. He didn't flinch when the walls bled. I never knew his real name. Just that he was a war orphan from Titan, and he could kill a sovereign with a pencil if you gave him a minute and a distraction. We advanced floor by floor. First it was just ruins, dormant tech, decaying support structures. Then we found the cryopods, thousands of them, not sovereigns, not even their soldiers. These were something older, thinner, taller, no eyes, bodies shaped for something other than war. Kel analyzed one of the pods. These aren't their ancestors, she muttered. They're the architects. I asked her what she meant. She showed me the neural interface attached to the pod's core. They weren't alive, not completely. These things ran the code the sovereigns worshipped. That hit hard. It wasn't a religion, it was remote control. The sovereigns had been puppets all along. The deeper we went, the more that truth repeated itself. Holographic logs, mind-jacking chairs, neural prisons where thought patterns had been copied and looped for centuries. The sovereigns didn't invent godhood. They inherited it from something that built a prison and called it divinity. And then we hit the final chamber. Blaine was the first to notice the temperature drop. The air felt thick, like we were walking through syrup. The light dimmed even though there was no source. It was like the chamber took light, drank it. The heart of the system was suspended in the center, a sphere, blacker than black, like a void wrapped in skin. No reflections, no readings, no movement. We didn't understand what it was. Until it spoke, it didn't use words, it used thoughts, direct injections into our heads, memories that weren't ours, pain that wasn't earned, triumphs we never experienced, the kind of communication that bypasses language and slams into your soul. It told us what it was. It called itself the chorus, not a being, a collection, billions of consciousnesses, uploaded, chained together, reprogrammed into a hive intellect that once ruled the galaxy before the sovereigns even existed. It created them, trained them, set them loose as missionaries of control. But they failed because they couldn't conquer Earth. And now the chorus wanted to try again. Kel collapsed first, screamed as blood poured from her ears. The chorus had reached inside and snapped something in her mind, tore her logic apart like wet paper. Hawk tried to drag her back, but got hit with a mental spike that fried his ocular nerves. Blaine went loud, unleashed the chain gun at full blast. The bullets didn't hit anything, just dissolved in the air before they reached the sphere. I did the only thing I could. I ran forward. The AI had given me one last card. A kill switch. A data spike loaded with a virus made from old Earth rage, built in a lab beneath what used to be Nevada. A code so violent it burned through every system it touched. I jammed it into the console below the sphere. The effect was instant. The room screamed, not noise, everything. The walls, the ground, my own bones. The chorus convulsed as the virus spread, fragmenting the hive mind into splinters. Memories melted, voices overlapped and died. The sovereigns, masters, were dying, but so were we. Blaine took a spike to the chest. Vaporized, Kel's heart gave out. Mid-seizure, Hawk managed to shoot himself before the whispers could claim his last thought. I was the only one who crawled back to the shuttle. The extracted me 3 hours later. I don't remember the flight out. I was unconscious. My body broken. My mind barely mine. The system was collapsing. Without the chorus, the sovereign empire fell into chaos. Their fleets turned on each other. Their temples lost their power. Their divine fields shattered. We didn't just kill gods, we killed the idea of godhood. Now I sit here orbiting what's left of the planet. The crew is dead. The captain's dying. The AI is still glitching, burned out from interfacing with something not meant to be touched. And me, I stare at the stars and wait for something worse. Because here's the part no one back on Earth will ever know. When the chorus died, something answered, something bigger. And it's on its way. 3 days after we killed the chorus, we picked up the signal. It wasn't broadcast, it wasn't a distress call. It was an echo. Not in the usual sense, not a bounce of sound or light. This was deeper. Something in the very fabric of space had rippled, like the universe inhaled when the chorus died. And now it was exhaling, like whatever we'd broken was part of a chain, a lock, and we just snapped the last link. The AI, what was left of it, refused to analyze the waveform. Every time we tried, it rebooted itself. I'd never seen that before. We'd built it to withstand quantum stress, mind-draping algorithms, even nanite plagues. But this signal, it broke our best machine's will to even try. That should have told us everything. The captain, barely breathing in the medical bay, called me in. His voice was weak, his skin pale and stretched thin. There were tubes in his neck, a slow drip of painkillers keeping him from losing his mind entirely. Half his chest was reconstructed after the blast damage from our descent. But his eyes, they were still fire. "You opened something," he rasped. "I didn't have a choice," I said. "It was either end the chorus or let it rewrite us." He smiled, if you could call it that. More like a twitch of cracked lips. "You think they were the top of the food chain? Son, we just stepped into their territory. I didn't ask who they were. He wouldn't have answered. He just nodded toward the data core beside him. Check Deck 12, the deep vault. The deep vault wasn't on any official map of the Vanguard. Hell, most of the crew didn't even know it existed. You had to cut through engineering and then drop past 3 levels of blacked out maintenance shafts. The air got colder the lower I went, the lights dimmer. By the time I reached the last hatch, my breath was fogging. There were no controls on the door, just a retinal scanner and a palm print. And somehow, mine worked. Inside the vault, there were only 2 things: a sealed black cube the size of a shipping crate and a console with a blinking message. Playback protocol Sigma 47. I hit it. A hologram flared up, grainy, damaged, like it had been stored under duress. A man appeared, older, grizzled. Uniform said Commander, but no name. Earth emblem patched on the shoulder. "This message is for any remaining Vanguard officers," the recording said. "If you're seeing this, then the chorus is dead. And that means we're next." He looked tired, haunted, like he'd seen too much. "We didn't build this warship to fight the Sovereigns," he said. "Not really. That was just stage 1. We knew what was under them. We didn't know the name. Just the math, the probability curves, the whispers in deep space." He pointed to the cube. "That's your only shot now. Inside is a lock sequence, a frequency scrambler, keyed to prevent quantum resonance. Long story short, it hides you, not from ships, from them, from the things that existed before logic, the things even the chorus was afraid of." I stared at the cube. It wasn't glowing, it wasn't humming, but it felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with weight, like it was dense with secrets. The message continued. "We thought we had time. We thought killing the chorus would end something, but we were wrong. It summons them's like blood in the water." The recording ended. That's when the lights flickered across the whole ship, and the Vanguard shuddered. We were no longer alone. I rushed back to the bridge. Only 3 crew were left on duty. Rennick, our last living pilot. Torin, ex-scout, now running sensor control. And Ash, our comms tech, who had stopped talking entirely since the battle on the surface. Rennick was at the helm, but the nav screens were glitching. "Something's jamming the drives," he said without looking at me. "We can't jump, systems reading normal, but it feels locked." "How?" I asked. "No enemy ships, no signals, no." "That's the thing," Torin cut in. "There is a signal, it's everywhere, not broadcast from a point. It's like space itself is humming." I looked at Ash. He stared at a dead console, no lights, no output, but he was whispering, not to us, to something else. I moved closer. "What are you saying?" Ash didn't turn his head, didn't blink, just kept whispering. I leaned in closer and froze. His words weren't his own. They weren't, in any human language, not even alien. They weren't even words, they were echoes, repeating, decaying, reverberating, like he was being used as a speaker by something that shouldn't have a voice. Then he snapped his neck sideways so hard it cracked like dry wood and dropped to the floor, dead. No wounds, no signs of attack. His body just gave out, like something hollowed it out from the inside. Ren stood and backed away from the console. What the an NBSP is going on, man, he muttered. This isn't war. This is wrong. I couldn't argue. We had all the guns in the world, but they were worthless against this. You can't shoot a concept. You can't nuke a nightmare. But maybe you can hide. I ordered Torin to help me activate the cube. The tech was way beyond us. Quantum coded multi-lock encryption and partially alive. It didn't open with a key, it opened with intent. We had to feed it our fear. No, not literally. I don't know how to explain it. It's like we had to be honest with it, with ourselves. We had to admit that we were prey, that we were nothing in the face of what was coming. No bravado, no rage, just pure, honest, existential dread. Then it pulsed once, dim white light, and opened. Inside was a single disk. I slotted it into the main system. The lights cut, the engines died, the whole shields reversed, everything went quiet. But it wasn't dead silence, it was masked silence. We were hidden and whatever had been watching, it passed us. An hour later, we drifted in total blackout mode, manual life support only. No signals, no weapons, just floating in the dark, waiting to see if the camouflage held. Torin stared at the monitors. It's here, he said softly. I didn't ask how he knew. I felt it too. A pressure in the bones, a wrongness. The air, like gravity, was thinking. We caught glimpses, shadows flickering across space, shapes that had no edges, reflections that appeared before the object did. One moment we saw a star field. The next it was gone, like space itself was being peeled. And through that tear it stared back. No face, no voice, just awareness older than galaxies. It didn't chase us, didn't attack, it just knew. That's when I realized the chorus didn't build their empire to control the galaxy. They built it to hide the galaxy from what was outside. And now we turned the lights on. Eventually, the pressure faded. Whatever it was, it left. Maybe it didn't see us. Maybe it didn't care. Maybe it was just marking the moment. But the message was clear. There are worse things than false gods. And now they're awake. Back on the bridge, I looked at the stars. They seemed dimmer now, not because of distance, not because of time, because I now understood how fragile light really is. Ren slumped in his chair, hands shaking. We going back to Earth? He asked. No, I said, we're not bringing this back. Then what? I stared at the navigation panel. We were running dark, floating towards the edge of the star system, no signal, no path. We go dark, we stay hidden. Until someone else finds the next signal. And maybe they'll be smarter than us. He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I think about Kel sometimes, Blaine, Hawk the captain. They died thinking they were ending something. But I know the truth. We didn't end it. We triggered it. And now the stars aren't safe anymore. Not because of aliens, not because of war, but because the void is watching again. And next time, it won't just be an echo. By the time Earth finally heard the silence, it was already too late. The Vanguard had been drifting beyond sovereign space for 13 days, hidden. Quiet, not broadcasting, not pinging. Not even listening. A floating graveyard with 4 survivors, 1 shattered AI, and a cube. That felt more like a tombstone than a piece of tech. Then the first Earth signal pierced the black. It was faint, distorted like it had been bounced through dirty mirrors across the light years. But the voice was human. UNSC command to Vanguard, respond. Repeat, respond, you've gone dark. Rennick froze at the console, his hand hovering over the comm switch. Torin glanced at me. If we answer, we risk exposing them to the signal. If we stay silent, they'll keep broadcasting. Sooner or later, someone else hears. He was right. Earth wasn't just a blue dot anymore. It was a hub. Rebuilding, repopulating, sending out colonies stretching across stars that no longer belonged to the sovereigns. Humanity was crawling out of its grave and into a universe that had been purposefully locked away. We'd killed the jailer. Now the cell door was wide open. I walked to the console, took the mic, and stared at the blinking cursor. Rennick whispered, "Are you really going to tell them?" I didn't answer. I hit transmit. Vanguard to command, do not send. Reinforcements, do not trace our location, cut all long-range signal. Bursts, we've breached something. Something the sovereigns were built to contain. The chorus is dead. But it wasn't alone. Static, then a voice I didn't recognize. Colder female, tired. Vanguard, clarify. What threat classification are we dealing with? I looked at Torin, then back at the dead. Black of the main viewport. It doesn't classify, it watches, it waits. It thinks in centuries and speaks in radiation. It doesn't want peace, it doesn't want war, it wants attention. Another pause. You're hallucinating, Vanguard. Come in. For psychological debrief and reintegration, we'll clear your channel. They didn't believe us. Of course they didn't. And why would they? Earth was just beginning to breathe. Again. Cities being rebuilt on Mars, domes on Titan, expanding, wormhole tech. Undergoing trial phases. The idea that humanity had finally won was the global myth everyone was clinging to. The sovereigns were dead. Earth thought the nightmare was over. But we'd only scratched the first layer. I killed the transmission. Torin looked at me. You think they'll listen? No. 10 hours later, Earth responded again. Different tone this time. No warmth, no diplomacy. Vanguard, your refusal to return will be treated as desertion. Repeat, you and authority now considers. You hostile, return immediately or face remote shutdown. Rennick laughed bitterly. Classic, we save their ass and they treat us like we're contaminated. Maybe we are, Torin muttered. He was half right. The cube had changed us, not in obvious ways, no tentacles, no psychic visions. But we felt it. Time passed differently on board. The clocks drifted. We'd go hours without realizing it. Sleep turned into blank stares. Dreams turned into echoes. Rennick sometimes talked to people who weren't there. Torin kept a pistol under his pillow, even though no one left on board could surprise him. As for me, sometimes I'd wake up mid-sentence, whispering a name I didn't recognize. Not human, not sovereign, just a sound. Like Varon. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew. It was coming. The captain died on day 15. Slipped in his sleep. Heart just stopped. No pain. No last words. We cremated him in the forward incinerator and sealed the ashes in the observation deck. The AI tried to play the funeral dirge, but all it could produce was static and fragments of Earth's national anthem, layered with screaming. We shut it off. Torrin stood by the viewport watching the ashes drift. "Why aren't we dead?" he asked. It wasn't rhetorical. We'd been in direct contact with a mind that shattered artificial intelligence, melted neural cortexes, and bent reality around itself like a plaything. We should have died on the surface, or when we touched the cube, or when the pressure of that thing passed over us in the dark. But we didn't. And the longer we stayed alive, the more I realized something. We were being allowed to live. Earth wasn't listening. They started pinging all colonies in outer sectors, asking if they'd seen us posting bounties, reward offers. One even tagged us as potential biological threats. An ironic twist considering the black sites that made us weren't exactly ethical themselves. Then one colony, Erebus 9, and independent mining post in the asteroid belt responded. They'd picked up a strange signal days earlier, a frequency similar to what we'd heard from the Chorus crypt. We sent a message: shut down your systems, lock your AI, go completely dark, do not investigate. No response. We tried again. Still nothing. A day later, the Erebus 9 beacon went dead, just gone. No explosion, no debris, no emergency broadcast, just silence. Like the colony had never been there at all. That was the moment Earth realized we weren't insane. They reached out again. This time, different. Vanguard, report everything you saw. Include sensor logs, psychological data, black box recordings. Renek flipped the channel off. They want data, let them come get it. No, I said, we give them a taste. Just enough to warn the smart ones. Rest. They'll figure it out when they vanish. Like Erebus. Torrin stared at the stars. Do you think it's picking them off one by one? I shook my head. No. Not yet. What then? I swallowed hard. It's listening. We compiled the logs. Not all of them, just fragments, clips, glitches, a partial video of the chorus. Spheres as it screamed, a garbled voice. Through Ash's final whisper, the vibration patterns from the cube. All just enough to scare them. We sent it. Earth didn't respond. But they did go quiet. No more broadcast pings, no more bounty messages. Just a ripple of silence across the solar net. They were doing what we were doing. Hiding. Torrin didn't make it past day 20. He shot himself. No note, no final message. We found his body slumped beside the cube, eyes open. Blood on the floor, gun still hot. I think he heard something. Maybe it called to him. Maybe it just waited for the weakest to snap. Only Renek and I were left. We sat in the dark together playing old Earth music on a handheld drive. Acoustic stuff. Stuff from before the collapse. Back when people believed in gods that cared and stars that just twinkled. Renek passed me a flask of synthetic rum. You think it'll find us? I nodded. Eventually. He stared at the black beyond the viewport. Then what? I don't know. I didn't lie. I didn't have answers. All I had were questions and the sound of silence slowly being filled by something breathing between galaxies. 3 days later, we got the last message from Earth, not audio, just text. We saw it. Nothing more, no signature, no timestamp, just that. That was 2 days ago. Renek stopped eating, stopped talking. I think he's gone inside himself, trying to pretend this isn't real. Me. I write this down because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to know that humanity didn't beat the gods. We just got their attention. And now, the real ones are coming. Not for war, not for peace, just for the joy of being seen again. And this time, we won't be able to hide. The Vanguard had been silent for 41 days. Renek hadn't spoken in 7. He sat in the co-pilot's chair staring at the empty star field like a man watching a noose tighten around his own neck. His eyes were red, his beard overgrown, his body hollowed out by the weeks of waiting. I didn't blame him. It had been a long time since either of us had seen a sunrise that wasn't a star dying. I spent my hours in engineering staring at the cube. The thing pulsed faintly now, not light, not heat, but a kind of slow heartbeat you could feel in your teeth if you stood too close. It was like a tiny piece of the universe had been put inside a box and was trying to find its way back out. On the 42nd day, it succeeded. It started with the clocks. Every chron on the ship froze at the same time, 03:17:04, and refused to move. No matter how much we reset or power cycled, they stayed locked as if the concept of time itself had stopped. Inside the hull, our blood still flowed. Our hearts still beat, but everything electronic thought it was 03:17:04. Forever. Then the stars began to shift. Not move. Shift. They bent at the edges of our viewport, like oil on water, sliding in impossible directions, their constellations rearranging into spirals that had no anchor points. It wasn't just an optical glitch. Our inertial sensors screamed as the Vanguard's mass registered at negative numbers, then infinity, then 0. Renek finally spoke. His voice was a whisper. It's here. I nodded. My hands were trembling. Stay still. Don't power anything up. Don't give it a signal. He laughed, a brittle, broken sound. You think it cares about signals? He was right. We'd hidden from it once. But you can't hide from a universe that's decided to look directly at you. The cube pulsed a second time, and the black began to move. It wasn't a ship, not a creature, not even a shape. It was absence given intent. Imagine looking at space, then realizing part of it is looking back, not because of eyes or features, but because of a shift in the way your mind interprets dark and light. The area around the Vanguard dimmed like a halo of unexistence. Stars flickered and vanished as something vast and faceless passed between us and them. Then came the vibration. It wasn't sound. Our ears didn't hear it. Our bones did. The hull of the Vanguard rattled as if every atom was being plucked like a guitar string. Tools slid across the deck in silence. The coolant in the pipes ran uphill. My teeth ached. The ship's AI woke for The first time in days, screaming nonsense through every speaker until I shut it off again. Renek clutched his head. "It's talking," he gasped. "God, it's in my head. What's it saying?" He blinked, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Not words, pictures, memories. Me, but not me." That was when I realized it wasn't just scanning us, it was copying, harvesting. I bolted for engineering and yanked the cube from its cradle. It was hot now, burning through my gloves. I dragged it to the central console and slammed it down, hoping whatever the black was might still recognize the cube's frequency as a mask. Nothing happened. The blackness pressed closer, folding space like a living shadow. The ship groaned as our hull plates flexed inward without being touched. The viewport turned opaque then, transparent again, like we were blinking, but couldn't control our eyelids. Renek staggered to his feet and reached for a sidearm. "If it's going to take me, I'm not going." "Easy." "Put it down," I barked. "You can't shoot a concept." He looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time since Mars' orbit, I saw pure, unfiltered fear in another man's eyes. "What do we do then?" I had no answer. The cube pulsed a third time. This time the black answered. The voice didn't come through our ears. It came through the walls, through the air, through the fluids in our cells. It wasn't a noise, it was a shift. A set of impressions pushed into our heads until we had no choice but to understand. We were locked. You opened. It wasn't angry, it wasn't pleased, it simply stated the fact. I forced my mouth to work. "What are you?" The impression shifted, and I saw flashes. A star collapsing before it was born. A billion minds chained together to form a lattice of thought. A lock sealing a door on a cosmic ocean. The sovereigns kneeling in terror before something they couldn't name. Then you broke the cage. The galaxy is mine again. Reneg. We're not yours, we're not your food. For a heartbeat, I thought it might crush us for the insolence. Instead, it pulsed again. "Food, you think too small, you are a voice, a spark, I will use you to sing." The blackness surged forward. The hull alarm screamed as the Vanguard's outer plates began to peel. Back molecule by molecule, space folded inward until our corridor stretched into infinity, every panel mirrored into endlessness. Reneg screamed and fired his sidearm. Into the dark. The rounds never left the barrel. They hung in the air mid-blast, frozen like amber insects. Then they reversed, sliding back into the gun as if time was being rewound. Renek dropped the weapon, eyes wide. "Jesus Christ," the thing pulsed again. The song begins. I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed the cube, held it to my chest, and shouted, not words, just a primal noise. A roar. A sound of refusal. My whole body shook as I pushed every ounce of rage and grief and defiance into that one scream. The cube reacted. It flared white. Blinding, searing white, and for an instant the black recoiled. The ship snapped back into shape. The stars flickered into existence again. The rounds fell out of Renek's gun and clattered on the floor. Gravity returned and the voice went quiet. Renek stared at me. "What the hell did you do?" "I don't know," I panted, "but it didn't like it." I looked down. The cube was cracked, hairline fractures, spiderwebbed across its surface like ice on a lake. And from the crack something leaked. Not light, not fluid, something like a memory. For a heartbeat, I wasn't in the ship. I was standing on a plain of white stone, under a sky full of black holes. Colossal beings of pure geometry towered. Overhead, their bodies shifting like equations, their movements slow and deliberate. They were building something, a lattice of energy spanning galaxies, a prison, woven out of reality itself. One of them turned and looked directly at me. It had no eyes, no mouth, no face. But it spoke. "We are the makers, we built the lock. Do not break the second seal." Then it was gone. I was back on the ship, gasping. Renek gripped my shoulders. "What did you see?" I told him. He went pale. "There's a second seal." I nodded slowly. The cube pulsed weakly, like a dying heart. We didn't sleep that night. We sat on the bridge staring at the stars, waiting for the black to return. It didn't. Not immediately. But we could feel it out there. Waiting. Listening. Amused. I turned to Renek. "We can't go back to Earth," I said. "Not yet, not like this." "Where then?" "Somewhere cold, dead, no signals, no people. We need to figure out what this thing wants and how to stop it from using us." He barked a bitter laugh. "Stop it, we couldn't even scratch it." "No," I said. "But the makers built a lock once, maybe. They left a key." Renek's eyes narrowed. "And you think you can find it?" "I don't think, I know we have to." He didn't argue. He just looked at the cracked cube and muttered, "Second seal." We powered down everything but life support and drifted toward the galactic rim. Old charts marked a rogue planetoid out. There no atmosphere, no colonies, no signals. Just rock and ice. A good place to hide. As we drifted, I began to dream. Not normal dreams. Memories that weren't mine. Blue oceans under a red sun, metal. Towers taller than mountains, a hymn. Sung by a billion throats. Echoing across void and time. Each dream ended the same way. A door. And behind it silence. By the time we reached the rogue planetoid, Renek was coughing blood. His body couldn't handle the stress, or maybe the blackness had left something inside him. Either way, he had days at most. I landed the Vanguard on the frozen surface and shut down every system. The cube pulsed one last time. Then it spoke, not in impressions but in actual words. A whisper in my ear as I stood alone on the ice. "Find the key before it finds you." Then it went cold. Completely dead. Renek died the next day. I buried him in the ice. No ceremony, no words. Just a man who'd fought gods and found out they were only guards. Now I'm alone, a single human on a dead rock at the edge of the galaxy, sitting inside a warship built to kill deities, holding a cracked cube that might be the only map to the second seal. And somewhere out there in the dark, between stars, something vast is smiling, because the first seal is gone, and the song has only begun. The silence on this rock wasn't like the silence of space. Space was empty, indifferent, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. But here on the dead planetoid I landed the Vanguard on, the silence was personal. It felt like the planet was waiting for something, watching me, not from the stars above, but from somewhere beneath the ice under my boots. I spent the first few days simply surviving. Oxygen reserves were stable, food rationed, life support held, though I Shut it down for 16 hours a day just to keep the systems from running hot. The cold never left the hull. Frost bloomed on the bulkheads like slow moving moss. The cube stayed dead. Not a flicker. Not a pulse. It sat on my desk in the command room, like a corpse no one dared bury. Every night I dreamed. Sometimes it was voices whispering. Numbers, locations. Memories that felt like they belonged to entire civilizations. Sometimes it was the door again. The one I'd seen behind the makers. A great obsidian gate half buried. Starlight with something clawing at the other side. But on the 7th night the dream changed. This time it was the voice. Below. Just that one word. Clear as a bell. Spoken not as a suggestion, but a command. I woke up sweating, breath fogging in the frozen air. I knew what I had to do. There was something under this planet. I didn't know how. I knew only that I did. Like the dream had left residue in my bones. I ran a basic geoscan, just passive. Nothing active that could broadcast our presence. The Vanguard sensors barely worked in sleep mode, but what they found made my stomach twist. There was a structure 5 km below the surface, not a natural formation, not rock, not ice. It was geometric. Symmetrical. A perfect ring buried under layers of frost and ancient soil. The second seal. No. Not yet. But maybe the key. I prepped the crawler at the back of the ship. It was old, mostly used for terrain scouting back during the Sovereign Wars. But it still functioned in low-grav environments. No weapons, just treads, a heater, and a reinforced hull. The cube stayed behind. I didn't want to risk bringing it unless I had to. Something told me it might interfere with whatever I was about to find. Or worse, attract attention from the wrong place. I drove into the frost following the scanner's signal. The landscape was jagged, broken by ancient impacts. The sun here was barely more than a star-sized smudge in the sky, casting long pale shadows that stretched like fingers over the ice. After 2 hours of crawling, I found it. Fissure, perfectly circular, not natural, a shaft drilled from above or below, smooth as glass, wide enough for the crawler to descend. My teeth ached just looking at it. Still, I went in. The descent was slow. The crawler's floodlights lit up the walls, not rock but some kind of dark metal fused with obsidian. I ran my glove across it as we passed, and my HUD lit up with static. Whatever this place was, it was older than the Sovereigns, maybe older than Earth itself. I reached the bottom after 27 minutes. The chamber was vast, circular, domed, maybe 300 m across. At the center stood a monolith, 10 stories tall, smooth, seamless, covered in symbols that shifted when I wasn't looking. Not like they were glowing, more like my brain was processing them differently each time I blinked. The air was breathable strangely. I removed my helmet. Cold but not freezing. A stale, electric scent hung in the air, like ozone after a storm or burnt metal in an old machine. I stepped forward. Nothing moved. Then, the monolith spoke. "You are late." The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't human. It wasn't even sound. It was certainty. Dropped into my mind like a stone into water. I flinched but didn't back away. "You're the makers?" I asked. "We are what remains. This construct is all that's left of their memory, a Fail safe if you are hearing this then. The first seal has broken. I nodded slowly. We broke the chorus. We killed the false gods. They were never gods, they were echoes. Proxies, they served only to distract. To delay, to buy time for you to evolve. For us to evolve. I frowned, you knew humanity was coming. A pause then. We left a seed in every species, most. Failed, yours did not. That made my blood run cold. Why? Because only suffering breeds immunity. I didn't understand, not fully, but I didn't have time to process. What's behind the second seal? Not what when. The chamber trembled. The monolith shifting symbols began to stabilize. The first seal held back the watcher. The second holds back the echo. The echo, I asked, the watcher sees the echo repeats, it does not kill it. Infects not flesh. Thought. I felt sick. The watcher, the thing we'd seen, that massive presence in the void, wasn't alone. It was only the beginning. And now it was whispering, I'd seen it. Already in my dreams, in the nightmares, in the memories that weren't mine. It had already started. I stumbled backward. You're saying it's in my head. Not yet, but it will be. It always begins with the last survivor. That stopped me cold. I was the only one left. Everyone else gone, dead, killed, or taken, or driven to madness. The second seal was time, and I was the countdown. I dropped to my knees. There's got to be a way to stop it. Monolith shimmered. There is a key. It is here. You must take it. Bring it to the gate, but know this: opening the gate ends the song for everyone. I frowned. What does that mean? The universe hums in patterns. Life is part of the melody. The watcher exists. Between those notes, the gate is silence. I realized then. The gate wasn't a door, it was a weapon. A last resort, one that killed the enemy and everything it sang through, including us. The monolith cracked, the chamber pulsed. At the base a small hatch opened. Inside was a crystalline shard, about the size of a dagger, glowing faintly, with the same pulse the cube once had. I picked it up, and the dream stopped. Just like that. I could feel the silence returning. Not the kind that watches, the kind that protects, but the monolith wasn't done. You must move fast, the echo spreads. Faster through solitude, the mind is vulnerable when it has no witness. My hands trembled. I wasn't going to last long. I made it back to the Vanguard in 6 hours, powered up the engines, turned on life support, loaded the key into the cube's cradle. Everything came online. The cube pulsed once more. Now the location of gate burned on every screen. It was far across an old sovereign sector in a dead nebula we used to call a place no ship returned from. That's where the second seal was, waiting, and I was its messenger. As I prepared for launch, I passed by Rennick's grave. The ice had cracked, no signs of movement, but I could feel something watching me through the grave soil. The watcher hadn't left. It was waiting for me, and for what I would open. Ash Cloud wasn't on any official chart. In the old sovereign maps, it was marked with a single glyph that translated loosely as return is death. It wasn't a nebula. Not exactly. It was what happened when a cluster of stars died too close together. A tangle of collapsed suns, frozen gravitational waves, and light that seemed to crawl instead of travel. The kind of place where physics forgot itself. That's where the makers had hidden the gate. The Vanguard broke atmosphere and coasted into the outer edge of the cloud. My consoles flickered, dimmed, then steadied. The hull shuddered like it had crossed a threshold of cold water. Outside, the stars blinked and vanished, behind curtains of violet gas and particulate dark matter so dense it behaved like liquid. I gripped the controls. Here we are, I muttered to no one. The shard, the key, sat in the cradle beside the cracked cube. It pulsed in time with my heartbeat, like it was alive, or maybe like it was synchronizing with me. The closer I flew, the stranger things got. The nav computer stopped mapping space in coordinates. It began mapping it in moments, listing distances as durations, like 7 heartbeats to impact or 4 memories to bearing. Even my internal clock drifted. I'd stare at the display and find an hour had passed in what felt like a minute. And then the dream started again. Only this time, I was awake. I saw flashes of faces in the cockpit. Glass, Blaine, Kell, Hawk, Rennek. Not their corpses, but versions of them. Standing behind me, reaching toward the shard, whispering things I couldn't make out. The more I tried to ignore them, the louder they became, like a chorus, pressing against the hull. The echo, it was trying to get in. I gritted my teeth and kept flying. The gate revealed itself not as an object but as an absence. One moment the nebula was just swirling gas and dead stars. The next there was a hole in it, a perfect circle of nothing. A mouth opening into a darker dark. My HUD refused to render it. The computer marked it as no surface, even though my eyes told me it was enormous. At its edges floated arches, fragments of colossal rings, each one carved with the same symbols from the monolith under the ice. They weren't intact anymore. Some had broken and drifted away. Others were cracked like the cube. The whole structure looked wounded, as if something had been hammering at it from the other side. The gate was not only real, it was struggling. As the Vanguard approached, the shard in the cradle grew hot enough to smoke. Cracked cube lit with a low, trembling hum. My teeth vibrated with it, my heart raced, matching its pulse. It felt the ship and I were being threaded into the same frequency. Then the voice came back. Bring it closer. I flinched. No, I said aloud, not you. Not this time. But it pressed harder. Images flashed across my mind. Earth burning, cities drowned, billions screaming. Not as a threat, but as a promise. The echo didn't speak in fear. It spoke in inevitabilities. Showed me what would happen if the gate wasn't opened. I gripped the controls until my knuckles went white. You're not in charge, I hissed. Not anymore. I cut engines and drifted. The gate loomed. I remembered what the monolith had told me. Opening the gate ends the song for everyone. I still didn't know if that meant killing the echo and the watcher, or killing everything. Maybe both. Maybe that was the point. I stared at the shard. It pulsed once, then twice. Then I realized the pulsing wasn't just random, it was counting. A countdown. I bolted from the pilot's seat and ran to engineering, pulled the shard from the cradle and clutched it tight. Its surface crawled with symbols now, like liquid silver flowing under glass. My head filled with whispers, not threats, not screams, instructions. It was telling me how to use it. The gate wasn't locked by a mechanism. It was locked by a will. The shard was a carrier for that will. Piece of the maker's last thought, waiting for someone to finish what they started. But there was a catch. The user had to fuse with it, not as in hold it while pressing a button, as in become it. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. The cockpit glass darkened. Outside, the gate opened wider, not physically but in potential. A swirling black storm formed around its edges, spilling tendrils of light that weren't light at all but negative shadows, twisting like fingers. The echo had noticed me, and it was singing. My ears bled. I dropped to my knees. It wasn't sound. It was memory being overwritten. It was every moment of my life, rearranged out of order. My first breath after Europa's ice cracked, my first kill on Mars, my mother's unknown face, Kel's scream as her mind was shredded, all of it folded together like paper, until I couldn't tell who I was anymore. The shard burned in my hand. I heard the makers again, faint almost, lost under the noise. Silence is survival, but silence must be chosen. I knew what they meant. I could fuse with the shard, take it into the gate, and trigger the end of the song. The watcher, the echo, all of it, maybe even humanity, maybe even the stars themselves. One last act of defiance, not victory, not defeat, just quiet. Or I could throw it away, let the gate rot, let the echo sing until every mind in the galaxy belonged to it. I staggered back to the cockpit, my vision blurred. The Vanguard's hull was peeling, not from damage but from unreality, the edges of the ship smearing like wet paint. My own hands flickered between flesh and light. The echo was already in. I didn't have long. I sat in the pilot's chair, shard clutched to my chest, and stared at the gate. My heartbeat slowed. For a moment I thought of Earth, not the domes, not the ruins, not the black sites, the blue oceans my ancestors once saw, the forests that no longer existed. The idea of children who would never know silence except as death. I thought of Rennick's laugh, Kale's quiet brilliance, Blaine's muttered prayers, Hawk's steady aim, all gone, all part of me now, all watching. And I whispered, if I do this, no one remembers. The shard pulsed, not yes, not no, just waiting. I stood. Every system on the Vanguard shut down. At once, lights, engines, gravity. Everything. The ship became a dead shell drifting toward the gate. I walked to the airlock. My breath fogged in the dying atmosphere. My hands trembled as I slid the shard into my chest armor. It slid into place, like it belonged there. I could feel it sinking to my heartbeat. I keyed the lock and stepped into the air. There was no up or down near the gate, just a slow drift toward an absence so vast it bent thought as well as space. My tether to the Vanguard went slack, then snapped. I was on my own. The gate filled my vision, its edges writhed with unreadable script. Its center was not black but a color that didn't exist, an anti-light that ate the idea of looking. I felt my skin crawl as memories leaked from me, unspooling into the void like ribbons. The echo sang louder. I felt Blaine's rage, Kale's intellect, Rennick's defiance, Hawk's silence, all in me, all begging for quiet. I raised the shard. Its glow matched the gate. The maker's voice whispered one last time, the lock will break, the key will burn, the silence will choose. Then it was gone. Just me. And the song. I don't know if I screamed or if the sound was just in my head. I drove the shard forward into the heart of the gate. Light exploded, not white, not black, but every possibility in between. For an instant I saw everything. The Watcher turning its faceless head toward me, the echo reaching fractal and infinite. The makers, long dead, waiting in a silence they had built with their own minds, and me, a single human, a spark in the void, holding a key made of defiance. The gate opened. The song stopped. Everything went still. I don't know how long I floated. Time wasn't a thing anymore. Space wasn't a thing. There was just quiet. Then a whisper. Not the echo. Not the Watcher. Something else. You chose. I tried to answer, but no words came. The voice continued. The song has ended. But the silence is not empty. It is yours. Then I was falling. Back toward a starless sky. Back toward a ship that might not exist anymore. Back toward myself. When my eyes opened, I was in the Vanguard's cockpit alone, systems dead. Outside, the gate was gone, not closed. Not destroyed, just gone. As if it had never been there. The nebula was quiet, the stars were bright again. I touched my chest. The shard was gone, but inside me something pulsed once, faint like a distant heartbeat, and I realized the echo had stopped. The Watcher had vanished. The song was over. But the silence had moved into me. The Vanguard drifted through the dead quiet of ash cloud, blind and breathless like a lungless corpse, floating in space. Its engines were cold. The AI was gone. The air recycling systems wheezed in and out with mechanical effort, but they too were failing. I sat in the cockpit, still alive, still human. I think. Mostly. The stars outside were clear now. They didn't bend or flicker or scream. They just were. And I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen them like that, honest and unconcerned, untouched. I should have felt victorious. I'd reached the gate, fused with the shard, stopped the echo, driven the Watcher back into whatever crack in reality it had crawled from. But there was no celebration. Only me. And the silence. It lived inside my chest. Not like a parasite or an infection, not something foreign. It was like discovering a part of me had always been hollow, and now something had filled it. Not with light, not with warmth, just stillness. A cold that didn't bite but hummed gently across every nerve ending. The kind of quiet that you only find after everyone else is gone. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then the hallucination stopped. The dream stopped. Even the lingering memories of Renek and the others faded, not erased, just muted. As if the silence had taken their screams and locked them away where they couldn't echo anymore. And when I closed my eyes, I didn't sleep. I listened to nothing. I ran diagnostics on the ship. The results were grim. Power reserves 12%, oxygen 3 days max, fusion core fried, FTL drive inert, comms offline, AI core corrupted. No help was coming. Earth hadn't sent anyone. They were either too afraid to approach ash cloud, or they'd already been claimed by something worse. Either way, the Vanguard was a tomb, and I was its last ghost. But I wasn't afraid. That's the thing the silence changed. First, fear. I remembered what the makers said. The silence must be chosen. They weren't talking about turning off the noise. They were talking about becoming something the noise couldn't touch. I used the last of the ship's auxiliary power to record a message. Just one. I didn't send it. I didn't even encode it. I just saved it to a crystal drive and sealed it in a launch pod. Maybe someday someone would stumble across it, an archaeologist, a scavenger, a survivor. Maybe they'd hear my voice and understand. Maybe not. It went like this. If you're hearing this, it means the noise has stopped. Or at least you think it has. You're wrong. It's just sleeping. Waiting. We called them gods, then monsters, then nothing. We were wrong every time. They're not things, they're states of being, the watcher, the echo. They exist in between what we know. They fed on our thoughts, our voices, our dreams. We broke their lock, we let them look. And then we asked how to make them stop looking. The answer was silent, not the absence of sound, but the absence of self. I became that silence. And now I'm what watches them. I ejected the pod. Let it drift into the dark, didn't bother to watch it go. I had other things to do. On the fourth day, I stopped eating. Not because I was starving. Because I didn't need it anymore. My body still functioned. But differently. Slower. More efficient. Like every cell had been tuned to some frequency that didn't rely on metabolism. My breath fogged less. My skin no longer cracked from the cold. I should have died 12 times over. But I didn't, and it wasn't because I survived the gate, it was because the gate survived in me. That's when the Vanguard picked up a signal, a flicker, just a burst of something weak and distant. I rerouted the last dregs of power to the receiver. The transmission was barely readable, buried in radiation and distortion. But I pulled out one word. Help. It came from a colony sector, 1. I remembered Velis 9. Mid-outer rim, human settlement, no more than 40,000 people, no warships, no defenses, no idea what had been lurking behind the stars. I stared at the coordinates for a long time. Then I rerouted the flight path. The Vanguard couldn't jump, but it could drift. I aligned the ship toward Velis 9 and fired the emergency thrusters, burning the last of our fuel to give me just enough speed. It would take weeks, maybe longer. But I didn't feel the time. The silence dulled the days. They folded in on themselves. I began to sense presence differently. Not through sight or sound, but through awareness. I could feel Velis 9 before I could see it. And I could feel what was already there. By the time the planet appeared in the viewport, I already knew. The echo had found them, no watcher. No massive cosmic eye. No warships or divine thunder. Just changes. The atmosphere shimmered wrong. The planetary rings had twisted themselves into spirals. The colony lights blinked in patterns. Not Morse or code, but brainwave mimicry. Like the whole city had become a mind. I docked anyway. Not because I was brave, because I was what they needed. I stepped off the ship. In full gear, the air tasted of static and burnt copper. The gravity pulsed instead of staying constant. I passed people in the streets who didn't blink, didn't speak, just watched me with smiles that didn't fit their faces. I knew what the echo had done. It had whispered itself into their dreams, used their grief, their hopes, their memories, turned their thoughts into invitations. It was no longer singing at the galaxy. It was building choirs. But when I walked among them, they stopped, stared, froze. The echo inside them recognized me, or maybe it feared me. Either way, it went silent. One by one, the lights flickered and died. The patterns stopped. The smiles faded. And then the colonists began to scream. Not out of pain, out of being disconnected. Like I had silenced a song they never realized they'd been singing. Some fell, some shook, some dropped to their knees and begged for the noise to return. I stood among them and said nothing. The silence did the talking. By the end of the day, Veli's 9 was quiet, not dead. Just hushed. The colonists wandered like survivors of a dream, blinking at the stars like children. Some wept, some slept, none spoke, not yet, not until they learned how to speak without hearing first. I left them with no instructions, no threats, just a warning scrawled on the walls of the main comm center. 4 words. Don't break the third. I don't know if they'll understand. But maybe someday when the next dream starts to hum, they'll remember what silence feels like. And they'll choose it before it chooses them. I left Veli's 9 in an escape pod, didn't bother plotting a course. Let the stars take me wherever they wanted. The silence doesn't need coordinates, it just needs a witness. And I'm still watching. Somewhere, the third seal waits. And when someone's foolish enough to break it, I'll be there.